Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Juliet Scott-Croxford. I'm the CEO of Worth Media, and I'm delighted to be joined on stage by three incredible social entrepreneurs and leaders who are working towards a more inclusive and empowered workforce. Starting from my left, or your left to right, we have founder and CEO Sloane Davidson of Hello Neighbour. We have founder and CEO of the Empowerment Plan, Veronika Scott, and we have President and CEO of Greyston, Mike Brady. So we're going to jump straight in. Veronika, I'm going to start with you, also known as the Coat Lady. Introduce yourself and your 2-minute elevator pitch, please.
Awesome. So my name is Veronika Scott. I started Empowerment Plan about 7 years ago as a class project in college. I got the name the Coat Lady because I was going to school for industrial design and designed a coat that turns into a sleeping bag that we give out internationally for those that are displaced on the streets or refugee camps or disaster relief situations. And the part of Empowerment Plan, why we're called Empowerment Plan and not just like the Coat Project, is the fact that we hire individuals that are in shelters that have children, and we employ them to make the coat. So people are employed with us about 2 years before they go on into other jobs across the city of Detroit. And while they're with us, they're getting paid not only to learn how to sew and produce the product, but they're also getting paid to go to classes like GED, financial health and wellness, professionalism and leadership development. And we bring all of these things on site through a group of partners and offer case management so that every single person we've ever hired has been able to move out of the shelter permanently within the first 4 to 6 weeks of working with us. And not a single person has fallen back into homelessness once they've started working at Empowerment Plan. And so that's something we're really proud of, and that really speaks to the empowerment part of the work that we're doing.
Thank you. And Mike, tell us about Greyston.
Glad to. Has anyone heard of Greyston? Has anyone had Ben & Jerry's ice cream? So if you ever had chocolate fudge brownie ice cream, for 30 years we've been making the brownies that go into that ice cream. We do it in a bakery outside of New York in Yonkers, and we do it with a hiring model that we call open hiring. Anyone that comes to the front door of the bakery, they put their name on a list. We take the next person off the list who have a job available, and we give it to them. No background checks, no reference checks, no interviews, no credit checks. We trust in the power of people to be successful, and we invest in that power until we're proven otherwise. What we're doing now is embracing a journey that's working to inspire every other business leader and city to adopt our model. We think there's the potential that every business could open their eyes to a new way of doing human capital and saying we're going to invest in the power of people to be successful and offer a yes to the next person rather than 99 no's in an attempt to find the person that they think would be the right fit for their organization. And we think by opening people's minds to open hiring, that we can change a lot of the issues around people returning from the prison systems, issues around poverty, homelessness. Hopefully after this speech, you'll be inspired to perhaps go think about how you could do that at the place where you work.
Thank you. And Sloane?
I'm inspired already, so if that counts. So Hello Neighbor would be the scrappy little sister on stage because I founded this organization just over 2 years ago. Hello Neighbor is a mentorship program first at its core, and we match recently resettled refugee families with caring neighbors to help guide and support them in their new lives. In the last 2 years, we've matched 95 families from 13 different countries. We're located in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where many people might not think of as a place that is supporting refugees or welcoming refugees, but we certainly are. 100% of our families live on or below the poverty line and have been in the U.S. between about 6 months and 3 years. Despite that, they're buying homes, they're having babies, they're getting cars and licenses and jobs, and we're really there to help them navigate the American system and culture, break social isolation, and ultimately feel more comfortable and confident in their new lives, and also help support a more inclusive and welcoming city. So while a big part of what we do is around this one-to-one model, which I do view as catalytic in bringing humanity back to people who have had that stripped from them as they were forced to flee their homes. We also work a lot in employment, in housing, in schools, in hospitals, talking to everything across the city around how to address English language learners in a city that maybe didn't have to really dive into that as much before, and also just how to build more inclusive practices overall.
What a panel. Thank you. I'd like to start with talking about the positive impact that your companies, enterprises are having on the public and private sector within the communities that you work with. So, Sloane, how has the approach to mentoring refugees in Pittsburgh influenced or impacted the way that the city thinks about an inclusive workforce going forward?
Yeah, so in Pittsburgh, from the very moment that I started Hello Neighbor, the mayor, the chief of staff, the inclusive innovation team, I mean, a number of people across the city government have been incredibly supportive of the program, have either invited Hello Neighbor in to discussions around how the city can be more inclusive, or invited us out into the community to kind of showcase that work. And so I think a lot of what we do is connecting and building a little bit of a connection between the refugees and the immigrants, which tend to be unseen because of the extreme social isolation. And this is the same as homeless, veterans, seniors, other low-income groups. Social isolation is certainly not unique to non-native English speakers, but they go to work, they go to school, they go home, that's it. They go to a grocery store on a weekend and a place of worship. And so for many, many people in Pittsburgh, and I imagine in most of the cities you live, people might be thinking we want to support refugees and immigrants, but they just don't see them, they're not at the table having the discussion. And so since we're in the home every single day, and our mentors are spending on average 10 hours per month. In 2 years, we've tracked over 5,000 mentoring hours. And so we're really hearing firsthand what their issues are and being able to relay that to all of those institutions, city and otherwise, that exist where we are.
And so is the initiative as much about mentoring refugees as it is about educating broader stakeholders in the community?
It is. I mean, we're refugees first. I sort of say I'm refugees all the time, every day. But we are creating this, I say we're creating this army because it really has been very, very important to teach the mentors and all the leadership across Pittsburgh and everyday people about the refugee experience. And actually part of our core program is we built a refugee advocacy certificate. It's something we're starting to license out to other organizations. So if anybody here is interested in that, I'm happy to talk about it. We did get some funding from a group out of the UN, UNHCR, in support of that. But it's really about how to best advocate for refugees. And again, it's refugees, but I think it could be any number of groups that need a little bit of help in navigating systems and culture and things like that. So we sort of feel like we're starting with refugees, but there's a lot of opportunity. And I think that in a place like Pittsburgh, it's been a perfect place to start it because they've been so welcoming and excited, and there's never really been anything like that before.
And Veronika, just sort of switching to private sector, how has the empowerment plan influenced the private sector group within Detroit or further afield with what you've done?
It's been really interesting to see what started off as this like really very small class project spiral into something much, much bigger. And this is what we didn't expect to happen, but when everybody here thinks of somebody that has been displaced or is homeless, they all have this kind of image in their head of what that person looks like. And it's very damaging. And for most individuals, people are treated as if they're less than human because they're displaced. And the way that others talk to individuals that are homeless is also this idea that they've done something horribly wrong to get there, and that homelessness is their defining characteristic. It is who they are. And so when we talk about that in the private sector, Detroit is a place with extreme poverty and now exciting revitalization in the form of like a lot of restaurants and very fancy high-end leather goods stores and things of that nature, but now gentrification and a loss of the population that had been a part of Detroit for many years that are not actually being included in this resurgence. So a lot of companies are settling new headquarters downtown and hiring thousands of people, but the population that had been through thick and thin with the city of Detroit were not being included in that hiring process. They weren't even making it through the phone screening. And so for us, we started off as making the coat and hiring the people that would need it, so they may never have to use the product, but then using this as a way to leverage the fact that we're a growing organization. We have a Department of Labor certified sewing apprenticeship program so that others can use us as a stepping stone into those jobs. People that we're not getting through even to that phone screen, how do we help them work with us, learn, professionalism and leadership development classes, get mental health support on site. We have a clinical therapist on staff, and get their GED and get paid to do it. Things like that so that they're being invested in while they're with us. And then starting partnerships now with companies, mostly actually medical groups, which is interesting, not in sewing, but we're getting people into middle-skilled, middle-income jobs. And that's the thing that we are so excited to see is that people go from being in a shelter to 2 years later making $18 an hour plus benefits. Because we don't want to help people get into a pipeline of staying kind of in the working poor. And so that's been an interesting now partnership with a lot of companies locally. And now, because our reach with the coat has been global, we've done distribution of about 40,000 coats. We've done distribution across the entire US and now I think 18 other countries. It is interesting to see how other companies look at this and say, we want to hire people from you. And so how do we actually scale the work that we're doing into these other communities, like LA and New York, and even here we work with Spanx in Atlanta, and they want to see how they can bring that model to this community.
That's incredible, 40,000 coats distributed.
All made, we started with 3 people in a utility closet, year 1, making a couple hundred coats. It took us like 10 hours to make one. It was not an efficient process. So now to say that we're like doing 10,000 units or more a year with a staff of like 65 going through the program at any one moment, it is absolutely insane to think about.
And Mike, you've spoken a lot in the past about radical inclusivity and open hiring. How much of that is about mindset versus shifts in policy and HR procedures? Like, can you talk a little bit about how that's influenced and what that has influenced?
Yep, happy to, and I hope people realize when they go back that what I just talked about is that you can now eat ice cream guilt-free if it's chocolate fudge brownie. So take that with you after this. Greyston was started by a Buddhist monk. He believed in the power of people and that you could invest in their success and that non-judgment is the basis of what we're doing. That is a huge mindset shift for business leaders and for businesses that for decades now have invested in models that filter people out of the workforce without proof that those models are actually working in service to the company. So the mindset shift that we go through with business leaders and civic leaders is, are there different ways to give someone a chance? It's not a program, it's a job. But people deliver on the job. What they lack is the opportunity. And then the ability to kind of, to your last question, to break into these new models. We've now put roughly $65 million back into the economy of Southwest Yonkers through the work that we're doing, helping the people most in need. Meanwhile, we're making world-class products. So there is nothing different about the products or the types of brownies coming out of our facility, 40,000 pounds a day, a tractor trailer a day, running 24 hours. It's a world-class business working with people that many people in the room and around the world think are unemployable.
So what are the challenges that you're all still facing in these efforts? I'm struck by the fact that Greyston was set up 1982, and I just feel like there is still a pace issue. And we talk a lot about how do we activate and accelerate progress. Are we going fast enough? And if not, why not?
Yeah, well, there's a couple questions in there. And oftentimes I get asked, like, what are the issues you deal with at your business? And the issues are the same issues that any other business leader deals with. We don't have a host of other issues. But we come from the mindset of how do I help an employee be successful? So I may be thinking more about their kids and how successful they are, and I know you're doing the exact same stuff. How do we make sure people are coming and living in a healthy household? So those are new challenges to me as a business leader, but mostly because I want to get product out the door and be effective. What we are doing now, and through our work, we've launched the Center for Open Hiring, and you're getting to the urgency. We need to act quickly. Conferences like this are fantastic, but only if they inspire people to make change, because I'm concerned that the impact inequality, the gap that's forming now, it's too wide already. If we're not progressive, if we're not taking action, can we make the changes that'll give everyone in our country the opportunity to be successful? And that's where we're trying to push the urgency. Come work with us, come to the Center for Open Hiring. We'll help you to understand, experience the mindset shift so you can be progressive in your organizations and try to make the change.
And for the purpose of the audience, can you give some examples of what that looks like on a day-to-day basis? What steps could they or should they take to drive towards a more inclusive workforce?
There's no magic to it, right? So what we do is we just take the next person through the door and we say, these are the things you need to do to be successful. These are the things that if you were to do them, we'd ask you to leave. And then we ask you, what do you need to be successful? Do you have safe housing? Are your kids cared for? Or do you have access to healthy food? Where do you feel you are with mental health? Businesses have become too worried, in my opinion, about asking the kind of questions that will help employees actually be effective. So those are the kind of things we do differently. But my background is in business. It's in service to the business because I want a team member that's really effective. Meanwhile, we believe we're making great impact in our community.
Sloane, challenges that you're experiencing as you build out Hello Neighbor?
Yeah, I mean, on the employment side, not within Hello Neighbor, but I will say what we see with our families working at getting jobs in Pittsburgh, being, a Rust Belt city, so shouldn't be a stranger to people coming in and not speaking the language. That's the history of Pittsburgh. Mills, steel, people coming in. We have a history center, and they have a Twitter account where they post historic photos, and one of them that they posted I love. 100 years ago, it was a lunch break at the mill. The guys are all covered in soot, and they're eating sandwiches out of paper bags so it doesn't get dirty. And there was an English class happening because even if they weren't unionized or maybe being paid a fair wage and the living conditions were horrible, but yet, for some reason, they were being provided English. And I think what happens today in this rush to capitalism, this rush to, profit, a lot of those social services that I think businesses just intuitively did when we treated workers like human beings are gone. And so for a lot of businesses, what I see is that they want to be digital first, and they're leaving people behind. There was a refugee job fair that a resettlement agency put on, and we know a lot of the refugees worked on a resume, we said, well, what do you wear and how do you talk? And even if you don't have good English, here's how to navigate it. They get their resume in hand, went around the whole room, every single employer, hotels, staffing agencies, you name it, that would hire for housekeeping, dishwashing, really manufacturing, working on a line. They all said, go apply online. We're just here to tell you about the jobs. You can't actually apply here. You have to go online to apply. So what happens to someone who doesn't need computer skills for their job, but yet they need to have it to apply to be able to get, it doesn't make any sense. And I know that we're in this, save paper environment, moving forward in digital, but I really think it's causing harm to people that are coming in that, let alone don't have the tech skills, might not have the language skills, but are perfectly equipped for the job, would do that job, and would do it really well.
But they're being immediately excluded from even the process just by a system or a process that's in place.
And I think cities are very different. I mean, coastal cities, cities along the southern border, maybe you don't need to speak English to work in housekeeping. I can't say, but in Pittsburgh, certain hotels, airport, no, but in downtown, the hotels will say, we want to hire refugees and immigrants, but we want you to be able to speak enough English. If someone in the hallway asks you for an item, you can answer them. But they're not willing to provide the English class, or like, how is that going to work? Because what I see is within 3 months of a refugee arriving, fully vetted, paying taxes, someone has to go to work because they have to pay for their own rent, utilities, everything that they need. They are working. They can't go to an English class. They're taking a bus 45 minutes, an hour and a half each way to get where they need to be because of cost of living, because of, the way that our systems are. So I'm really concerned because I see people who want to work, who are resilient beyond compare because of everything they've been through to make it here, and are really struggling with being able to find a way to move from survive to thrive.
And I'm going to open it out to the audience after this question, so think about your questions in advance. Veronika, just sort of thinking about future and focusing forward, what excites you about the progress that we're making? What are you prioritizing next? And what advice can you offer people in the audience that are maybe thinking about this from their cities?
So that's, the urgency of now, like how quickly can we move is something that we're trying to address, because we're just a shop in Detroit. We have reach globally, but like these employment opportunities need to exist. They need to be out there. But it's, how do we come together and work with other organizations to make that happen instead of everyone being siloed and not communicating with each other? The next step is I'm seeing a lot of nonprofits, a lot of companies like Greyston now reaching out and saying, let's figure out how to address this as a group, because at this point, being isolated and thinking we're competing with each other in that sense is not helping. But for us, really working with a lot of companies that we wouldn't think would be interested in the work. We had the executives from Google and the executives from Goldman Sachs. They all flew out to spend a day at Empowerment Plan and learn how to sew, actually, the parts of the coat alongside our team members, because we really hate standard tours of come in, look at everybody in a fishbowl. And it's amazing that they're having trouble with their culture internally. Their company cultures are suffering. People are feeling disheartened, feeling like they're not being able to contribute anything, and they're not happy in their jobs. And so now these companies are looking to partner with us to figure out ways to engage employees. And I think if that continues from some of these large companies, then we can make some of those changes, but only internally, and it takes a while. That's an exciting thing to see happening.
And I only see that trend increasing because, increasingly the millennial workforce, that is what is driving a lot of their motivation, is actually demonstrate to me, the organization I work with, that you are making an impact to the bottom line beyond profit. So I can only see that as a good thing and accelerating what you're sharing. Mike, what about you in terms of future?
I thought you were going to ask other questions from out there. I wasn't ready.
That's all right. You can.
No. The reforms in the criminal justice system are really energizing to me. I think we're finally recognizing what our prison system has done to our communities. And it's not necessarily just the people that have gone through the criminal justice system, but the families and the communities from which they've gone and come back. We now need to be progressive in how we give those folks opportunities and how we think about how we can make change in our communities so that the future for everyone looks bright. And I'm excited to see where that's going. I want that there to be a lot more discussion around the future of work, being less about the advances in technology and more about things like Veronika was talking about, where there's a culture of inclusion, a feeling within an organization where you're committed not just to your business, but to the community. And I think that can happen, but the conversations need to start now.
That was a good comeback. What questions do we have from the audience? Wave with both hands. We've got one here. She'd love to hear more from Mike about the retention rate at Greyston.
Yeah. So the retention rates at Greyston are better than industry average. That's after our apprentice program. And so you're getting into a bit of a process where we give anyone a chance that walks through the door with non-judgment. If people aren't able to work, we support them in where their next phase in their journey may be. So we do lose a fair number of people, maybe 4 out of 10 within the first month, because they're facing obstacles. And we're not capable of overcoming those obstacles, but we help them to understand these are the services out there so that hopefully next time they get an opportunity to work, they'll be successful. So we think that's a win.
Thank you. Other questions? That's a great question. So how have the models that you're applying been applied to other businesses?
You want me to start?
I'll go. And then if you can build on it. What we need to do is continue to demonstrate the ROI on this. So I talk day and night about this with business leaders. There's no friction inbound. All the investment of people coming in is invested in the person to be successful. So the ROI is all around creating better employees and better members of the community. We think there's a great value here for businesses, but until I get more to adopt it, and we have a handful of pilots underway, this isn't going to flip. So we need those people at the tip of the spear. We need the people that are at the front of the curve to say, yeah, I'm going to try this. I'm going to start with one job, maybe 5, maybe 1% of the workforce. And then once they see it and they see the amazing folks that I'm sure are working with Veronika and those at the bakery, they'll know that this is the type of thing that can change the culture of an organization. But we need the businesses to take a step.
Yeah, and to build on that is also saying that, yeah, we've seen a lot of small businesses. We get thousands of emails a year about replicating and then also about people's ideas of how they're implementing it in small ways. So we are spending the next 2 years packaging all of our data. So the fact that no one's fallen back into homelessness, what are the things, what are our interventions, and what are having the most impact? We're spending the next 2 years really deeply focused on that we're working with McKinsey to translate that, because what we've seen is a lot of small companies have started with 1 or 2 employees. They're not, the Spanx of the world. They don't have hundreds of employees. They're a small business that wants to have that kind of impact. And that's just from an interested individual and a small business owner. Now, to really move the needle, we need the larger companies to make commitments. And you saw that with like Starbucks and their 10,000 jobs initiative, which is so funny. For 10,000 jobs, that would take us, I can't even tell you how long to get to. And for them, it was a drop in the bucket. So doing more where you automatically see the impact. Starbucks saw the positive impact of that work. So having people come into our space is one step, like Goldman did, and seeing how the culture of the company is so much healthier, the retention, the satisfaction, the quality, the product is exceptional. All of those things happen when they come and visit. But the next step is how do we get them to actually commit in a bigger way to some of these employment practices. And we've seen it in small steps, but now we've got to figure out how to really crack it.
Thank you. We've got time for one last question. There is. Yep, just here. Thank you. What's your name? Josh, thank you. So the first question is, how do you shift to this model? And I think it sort of plays a bit to who is leading this change internally within organizations. If you've got an incredibly visionary CEO, you also need to influence and shift the thinking around the HR department, for example. So that was the first question. And the second one was, and the government's role in changing these policies. Sloane?
So I'll answer a little bit of the second one. So I think that there's a lot that's happening, at least here in the US, around public-private partnerships. There's two examples I can give. One is the Chobani founder has an organization called Tent. And Tent is like a public-private partnership where companies stand up and they make commitments to hiring a certain number of refugees. And they're global. So they have companies that are signing up from Italy, from Japan, from all across Europe, from the US, from South America, and they make that commitment, and then Tent works either with their country, with that corporation, on how to actually make it happen. Because the first is the intention of wanting to do it, but the plan of how you make it happen can be more challenging. And the idea is that companies big and small, from Barilla that makes pasta in Italy, to a car manufacturer, to a global beverage company, to a Starbucks, to a Marriott, that they can all learn from each other. And I'm sure that it can scale as well to slower businesses. And then in a regional example, we have a Allegheny County, that's the county Pittsburgh is in. They have a huge public-private partnership helping identify where there are gaps in employment. We specifically have one in skilled manufacturing, and there's about 100,000 open jobs right now in skilled manufacturing. And those companies, Kennametal, certainly across Alcoa, they don't care who is going to take the job. They need people to take the jobs. And so they're working a lot with government to either subsidize the apprentice training program or think about a pipeline that could come from anywhere, really, of how to make it happen. So I think that there's a lot that government can do in partnership with private companies to kind of help figure that out. And I think there's a lot they should be doing together, because coming together, they're going to figure it out faster than doing it alone.
And to speak on that second part of where government's role is, I think in that enforcement and incentivizing that. What we've seen in Detroit, there's examples of a large company coming in and saying that they will at least interview for 50% of their new hires, they'll interview people in the city that have Detroit residences. But the problem is the government's not enforcing that. They're not checking in on it. They're giving the incentive for it because they're saying they made a commitment to do it. But at the end of the day, they didn't say how many people they would hire. So it's kind of this, they created their own little loophole, and nobody's kind of sticking to that and helping enforce that. Because really, if they did make the commitment instead of just interviewing to hire, and the city was supporting it, then yeah, this is an opportunity that Detroiters are going to get. But right now, it just doesn't look that good. So I think there's a way to do it, and I think the governments have to be supporting it, and they have to be behind those initiatives.
And Mike, to finish, did you want to take the first question around influencing companies to shift their model?
I think it comes back to a bit of the ROI, but the organizations need the champion, but within it, it's not, you're going to give an opportunity to someone at a job that you might not think is consequential to your organization, and it could change the culture for everyone else. So think of the power of each individual job you have in an organization, and when I tell business leaders that they're without a doubt wasting money, it catches people's eye, right? And then you have to build on that and say, what can you create? And if you're not doing it and your competitor next door is, you're going to even be in a tighter spot when you need to grow your organization. So it's all those kind of pieces of logic that we drive in, and then we talk to civic leaders about the same thing. You need to do all of these things, or businesses are going to up and leave because they're not going to have access to great talent.
Sloane, Veronika, Mike, you're incredible innovators. Thank you so much. And everyone, just remember, don't feel guilty when you're eating that ice cream. Thank you.